Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvajikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jai Mudiriyet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, and to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtapayesha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 19th day of August 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. Chapter 25, the descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjan. Text 31. Tvanananang subrusutara lochanam Vyalambini lalaka vrinda samvritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam suchi smitahe Tvadananang subrusutara lochanam Vyalam vinilalaka vrinda samritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam suchi smite Tvadananang subrusutara lochanam Vyalam vinilalaka vrinda samritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bimukam shuchi smite Tvadananam subrusutara lochanam Vlalam vinilalaka vrinda samritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bibakam shuchi smite Tvadananam subhrusatara lochanam Vyalam vinilalaka vrinda samritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bibakam shuchi smite Tvadananam subhrusatara lochanam Vyalam vinilalaka vrinda samritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bibakam shuchi smite Tvadananam subhrusatara lochanam Vyalam vinilalaka vrinda samritam Unniyame darshaya valguvachakam Yadvridayana bibakam shuchi smite Tvat, your Ananam, face Subhru, having nice eyebrows Sutara, with nice pupils Lochanam, eyes Vyalambi, scattered Nila, bluish Alakavrinda, by locks of hair Sambritam, surrounded Unniya, having raised Me, unto me Darshaya, show Valguvachakam, having words very sweet to hear Yat, which face Vridaya, by shyness Na, not Abhimukam, face to face Shuchi smite, O woman with lovely smiles. So Puranjan is now praising this girl. My dear girl, your face is so beautiful with your nice eyebrows and eyes and with your bluish hair scattered about. In addition, very sweet sounds are coming from your mouth. Nonetheless, you are so covered with shyness that you do not see me face to face. I therefore request you, my dear girl, to smile and kindly raise your head to see me. Purport. Such a speech is typical of a living entity attracted by the opposite sex. This is called bewilderment occasioned by becoming conditioned by material nature. When thus attracted by the beauty of the material energy, one becomes very eager to enjoy. This is elaborately described in this instance of Puranjan's becoming attracted by the beautiful woman. In conditional life, the living entity is attracted by a face, eyebrows, or eyes, a voice, or anything. In short, everything becomes attractive. When a man or a woman is attracted by the opposite sex, it does not matter whether the opposite sex is beautiful or not. The lover sees everything beautiful in the face of the beloved and thus becomes attracted. This attraction causes the living entity to fall down into this material world. This is described in the Bhagavad Gita 7.27. Ichadvesha, I'll say you say, Ichadvesha samutena dvandvamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sargeyanti parantapa. O scion of Bharat, Arjun, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, overcome by the dualities of desire and hate. Close quote. This condition of life is called avidya. Opposed to this avidya is real knowledge. Sri Ishopanishad distinguishes between vidya and avidya, knowledge and ignorance. By avidya, or ignorance, one becomes conditioned, and by vidya, knowledge, one becomes liberated. Puranjan admits herein that he is attracted by avidya. Now he wishes to see the complete feature of avidya, and so requests the girl to raise her head so that he can see her face to face. He thus wishes to see the various features that make avidya attractive. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Now, what's the opinion of the gathered sages turning those fans on the altar off, or that fan on the altar off, until the end of class? A little quieter. Is it a problem? I'm sorry? Is it too loud? Okay, let's see if I can do it from here. Done. So, now we're seeing the result of all of this dalliance that's we've heard up till now, where they meet and he sees her, and he's becoming attractive. And as we were chanting that verse, I was just saying, what a beautiful verse. You know, the Sanskrit is so nice. There's some poetic ornaments there. But it's all about Maya. I mean, this is, of course, Bhagavatam. It's transcendental. It's leading to Krishna consciousness. But it just goes to show that the language, the elements of the material world, any of them can be made in such a way that they attract the living entity to enjoy, matter. So this is Puranjan now is he's representing all of us and how we can be attracted by the opposite sex. And especially in this case, it's described as women. And I'd like to, since our women have left, especially, for whatever reason, I want to go and refer to a section in the third canto. Some of you are familiar with this, Kapila Dev's teachings. And he's teaching his mother, but he's describing the dangers of being attracted to women. There's a bunch of verses in the Bhagavatam that are, we call them brahmacharya verses. They're verses for everybody, but they especially very, very starkly describe the problem with being attracted to the opposite sex. So the first one is a series, and one of the most prominent is the third canto, 31st chapter, verse 35. I don't know if some of you may know this verse. Natatasa bhaven moho bandaschan nipasangataha yoshit sangadyata pungso yatatat sangi sangataha. You know this verse. The infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to a woman or to the fellowship of men who are fond of women. Now this comes up again and again, this idea that it's not just attachment to women, but it's association, close association with those who are infatuated with women, then that will rub off on you. In other words, then you'll also become attracted. Similarly, you associate with sadhus, and their attraction for Krishna will rub off on you. This is the nature of sangha, or association. Sangat sanjayate kama, that famous line from the second chapter. According to your association, you develop your desires. So I'm not going to read these purports. They're all invaluable, but I'm going to read a portion of one of them near the end. Then he goes on. I'll just read the English. At the sight of his own daughter, Brahma was bewildered by her charms and shamelessly ran up to her in the form of a stag when she took the form of a hind. So this is, what's amazing about this is Brahma, you know. Even Brahma was attracted, and it created a situation of embarrassment for other creators that he had been. They were saying, what are you doing, you know? And so he gave up that mind and realized he made a mistake. Amongst all kinds of living entities begotten by Brahma, namely men, demigods, and animals, none but the sage Narayan is immune to the attraction of Maya in the form of a woman. Narayan Rishi, you know, whose whole practice is just to show the standard of the highest renunciation and the highest austerity. Prabhupada, I don't know if he mentions here, or maybe in one of these purports, that even Shiva, you know, his whole thing with Mohini Murti, that even Shiva could be attracted and lose his composure, and lose his equipoise. So he's telling his mother now, this is Devavati, just try to understand the mighty strength of my Maya in the shape of woman, who by the mere movement of her eyebrows can keep even the greatest conquerors of the world under her grip. And of course he reminded of Cleopatra. I think Prabhupada mentions in a lecture, maybe in this purport. And he goes on. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized his self by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman, for such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. Okay, so I think this may be the one. Yeah, it's in 1 in 41 that I'm going to read. The woman created by the Lord is the representation of Maya. And one who associates with such Maya by accepting services must certainly know that this is the way of death, just like a blind well covered with grass. A living entity who, as a result of attachment to a woman in his previous life, has been endowed with the form of a woman, foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband, as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house, and other material assets. Okay. Okay, it probably says, I'm not going to read the whole part, but in the middle, the relationship between man and woman is very complicated, but the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritual realization should be very careful in the acceptance of association of women. Now, in the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened, because if a man's and woman's attachment is not to each other but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. And he's speaking here, of course, of Krishna conscious household life. Yes, as it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone who seriously takes to Krishna consciousness, whether in the lower species of life, or a woman, or of the less intelligent classes, such as mercantile or a labor class, will go back home, back to Godhead, and reach the abode of Krishna. And then, kind of the conclusion, a man should not be attached to a woman, nor should a woman be attached to a man. Both man and woman should be attached to the service of the Lord. Then there is possibility of liberation from material entanglement for both of them. So, the point is that this extended allegory here is full of very important lessons for us. And here we see, as we've been hearing in the last couple of weeks, how Puranjan is the conditioned soul, and he's got all these senses. And what does the conditioned soul do? We're roaming around this forest of material enjoyment, the material world, without, reference to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or anything. This is just the ordinary material life, especially in this age where it's very, very hard to find anyone even interested in absolute truth or ending, birth and death. So now, this is the context is, this is a lesson from Narada Muni to King Pratyana Barishat, who has become absorbed in performing all these sacrifices, including animal sacrifices, for the sake of going to a higher planet and enjoying, very ideal sex life, basically. So now, it's interesting that in his performing of these sacrifices, he's obviously hasn't done it perfectly, because all of those animals he sacrifices just waiting to get back at him after they're supposed to get a new body, right? Ideally, but they haven't gotten a new body. So he's entangled. He's really in deep. And Narada Muni is saying this is not a very auspicious path, and he's illustrating it by this extended allegory. And the whole point is that in the material world, without Krishna consciousness, without association of devotees, without access to this knowledge, we're victims. We're going to be victimized by our own conditioned mind, by the material energy, which is full of all ways of attracting us. And that just keeps us bound to this world of suffering. So although in the process of living in this world, there are periods of time when it seems like this is our garden of enjoyment. This whole world has been made for me and made for us to exploit and to enjoy. But that's a tremendous fallacy. That's a huge mistake. This is one of the problems of conditioned life, right? These 4 disqualifications for understanding real knowledge. And there's a certain order, that I think. First thing is our senses are imperfect. Who can argue with that? The senses sight is limited, hearing is limited, mind is limited. So because of that, we make mistakes. Just look at the history of science. How periodically they have to rip up the books and say, well, sorry, that's completely wrong. Now we have the electron microscopes. I remember when I was learning science, in high school, there were 3. There were 3 subatomic particles: the electron, the neutron, and the proton. And the neutron was in the nucleus, and the electrons went around. The proton was there in the nucleus too, I think. And that was it. Oh, they had to rip that one up. As soon as they got these accelerators where they could smash the atom, they suddenly found a whole bunch of other subatomic particles. Some of them pretty strange, and I think one of them was named Strange, because it exists but doesn't exist. Exists in 2 places at once. Then came quantum mechanics, and just by thinking about it, you change. In other words, they found out a little bit more about the material energy, and so this is making. So what happens is, in perfect senses, you make mistakes, and therefore you become illusion when you keep making the same mistake again and again, and you teach it as the truth in my little textbook to grade 9 or 10, whatever I was in. And that propagates this false idea, and that's called cheating, because you don't really know. So imperfect senses leads to mistakes, and then illusion takes place, the main one, which is we're this body. And then that's propagated by your parents, by your teachers, by everybody. And the whole world is covered by avidya, which is one of the themes of this purport, right? Is that this avidya is the source of our problem. So this is until, as I've been making the point severally during these classes, until we get an intervention from someone or something, or Krishna himself, who can cut through the fog of this illusion and give us the truth, we're helpless. We're bound up hand and foot by our ignorance, by our mistakes, by the material energy. So now Prabhupada gives this verse, as he often does, from the Bhagavad Gita 7:27, as an explanation of how we came to the material world. And so it doesn't go into it too much here, but the way he explains this, I've heard him explain it in lecture and other purports. Ichcha dvesha samutena. So ichcha means desire to enjoy. Dvesha means abomination. In other words, repulsion. So attraction, repulsion. Samutena gives rise, those two, to dvandva moha, the illusion of duality. This is good, this is bad, this is good. There's a verse in the CC, which I always forget the Sanskrit, or it's Bengali really, is that the idea that there's good and bad things in this world is completely illusory. It's all bad because it keeps us bound in this delusion of duality. So now with the delusion of duality, this is good, this is bad, all living entities, thus bewildered, some moham, completely bewildered, they enter into this sarga, this creation. Sarga means the creation. Yanti means to come into, operantaba. So Prabhupada would take this verse as an explanation of how we came here. This is a big question. He had at least 10 in the letters of devotees asking him, well, how come we came here? Right? We're in the spiritual world. And of course, you read in the Bhagavad Gita, there's at least 4 or 5 verses. Krishna says, you go there, you don't come back. So what's the real essence of the difference of coming the first time or coming back? But there is a big difference. It's the principle of once burn, twice shy. This is one of these little mottos in English. In other words, Prabhupada did use that. A kid is very curious about the fire, and the mother says, no, no, no. And he says, yes, yes. And he says, okay. And so he touches the fire, and he gets a little bit burned, hot. Mother makes sure it's nothing serious. And he never does it again. That's the origin of it. Once burned, twice shy. You learn. So we've been burned. When we finally wake up in this material world, we realize, yeah, it was a big mistake. We've been suffering like anything. See? So if and when we finally go back there, we'll say, we're not going to be dwelling on it and thinking about it because we're absorbed in Krishna. But we have the sense that I tried that already. I'm not going to go again. So you don't come back. That's what Krishna says in the Gita. But we've been up, we've been there for, the living entities who are there. They've been there forever. But somehow or other, because of the minute independence that we have, we can develop this itcha, desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, and dvesha, repulsion from serving Krishna. That's the thing. We don't want to serve Krishna. We want to enjoy separately. And so Krishna gives us that opportunity because we have the independence. But he stays with us as the super soul, and he comes periodically himself, rarely, as Bhagavan, original. But he has other expansions. He comes and he always empowers devotees to present the truth if we want it, if we have some curious desire. And the greatest devotees, even if someone isn't curious, they'll come anyway and try to give it. Just like the book distributors, people aren't walking around Seaport Village looking for the absolute truth, but they're going to run into Vijay, And there's at a table, and that smile, and somehow if they're fortunate, they're curious, beginning with curious, and they'll say, "What do you got there?" And that could be the beginning of their auspicious life getting out of this material world. So the illusion is deepened and made more powerful when we actually become attracted, especially to the opposite sex. It's a full program. You have the pleasure is there. You're being you feel I'm in love, and you're getting love from the other side. But what is it, the description that's given by Rishabdev in another famous verse by brahmacharis? Remember. Pungsastya mudani bhava metang tayomato vidyagrandamahu atagrihat chaita sutapta vittar janasya moha yamahamameti. We heard this one already. So, of course, this is all describing materialistic household life. This is not, as Prabhupada makes clear in that purport, and is clear in our whole sampradaya. There are wonderful householders who can live together. There's a wonderful site, shamalidasi.com, which is dedicated to her life, And this describes her life. I had no idea she had a master's degree in English. Did you know that? I didn't know. And she was, teaching. She was there's wonderful homages given to her and everything. And realize that this was very auspicious. Her marriage to Bhishma Dev. He was so supportive in this final period, and what to speak of her parents, and the whole. And it was all a whole bunch of friends, a wonderful sangha. And so it can be a great facility for going back to guided, a Krishna conscious household life, and we've seen in our sampradaya. But this is about this materialistic household life, or just getting together with the opposite sex. It just deepens the attachment. So here in this verse, Rishabdev, he gives kind of the generic thing usually happens. Punksastri mitani bhava metam. That's what we're witnessing here. The sex bhava, the whole mood, the whole gestalt, it becomes prominent, and then when you're actually united in the sex, mitani bhava, tayo mato, hridaya grantamaho, the knots in the heart become tightened. The attachment becomes very, very tight. And then in a civilized, world, this marriage, and then what happens? Griha, Cheta, Sutta, Apta, Vitta. There's an order to this. So first thing is you got to have a place. The first place in the modern age, in the backseat of a car or something. But assume that you develop, marriage, so you need to have a place. And so there's an apartment or a house. Getting that alone is like problematic in today's world, especially the West. So you have a griha. Now then you need a job. Now he mentions chaitra, as I said, the usual thing, especially even in India today, huge percentage of the people are little farmers, they got a little land. So you have some land. That means you have a means of sustenance for the wife and the children, which is next. So so you have the place, you have a job, and then comes sutta, or children, and apta. Now there's a term in Yiddish I can't resist because I grew up in that. The whole mishpocha means the in-laws and the relatives and the aunts and the uncles and the cousins and everything else. So that's also an entanglement, And in India, a lot of them live with you. That's the extended family. They're all together, So, and you're the breadwinner, so you've got now all these responsibilities. You can see the entanglement. And therefore you need money, vittai. And that it can be a huge headache, So all of this together, janasya moho, generates more illusion and more entanglement, characterized by yama aham mameti, I and my. I am the husband of this wife. I am the father of these children. I am the person, supporting all these relatives. And this is my land, this is my car, this is my bank balance, this is my insurance, and so forth. And so that's a deep entanglement, a big web. And so Krishna consciousness is a program for disentangling. Now, the scientific way of doing it is, so this is something you go through. You get trained as a child for renunciation. I was just hearing Prabhupada lecture that, traditionally, this brahmachari gurukul. Krishna went to gurukul, And so that's, you're trained not in letting the senses go wild, but in restraining them and learning the process of renunciation and self-restraint. I mean, it's gotten so bad. I mean, when I was growing up, we didn't have anything like this, in high school, before high school. I mean, the advent of the internet, where any kid, 13-year-old kid, can hit the buttons and they can get pornography. It's crazy. It's just completely insane. And you see the result, chaos in society. So, but traditionally you get trained, but then the vast majority of the brahmacharis, they grow up and they graduate from Gurukul, they want to get married. And with the permission of the guru, you get married. And it's a whole, even astrology is consulted, is compatible, And it's understood, traditionally, it's not for the whole life. There's a certain period where you'll have children, you meet your responsibilities. But then after 25 years or so, you start getting detached. And there's vanaprastha, where the wife and the man go together to different pilgrimage spots, And we saw, I asked Vaikuntha, he came here, with his wonderful wife, Janvi. And they had raised two wonderful kids. The older boy, Baladev, he called me. He was interested in what kind of career would be available in BBT, because he's very literary inclined, very articulate. He's in college there in Florida now. And the daughter was very nicely married, and she was also, I think, a teacher. But now they're saying, what's up, It's nice to see you, Said, well, we're moving toward Vanaprastha, and they're thinking of traveling. And there's another couple that came down from Canada. I knew them. I met them every year. I would go to Toronto Ratha Yatra for the last 12 years. This year I couldn't go. And what's his name? I think Kavi Karnapur. And the Purnamasi is the second Purnamasi. And he had a whole career as an inhalation therapist, which is what I did for 1 year, way back before I joined. But he was doing it for years and years, and now he's retired. And he was all shaved up, and they came down here, and we're going through different temples, like that. So that's the way to do it. In other words, the point is, you don't lose sight of the goal of human life. This is the big danger of getting absorbed completely in sense gratification and all of its entanglements. You completely forget about it. So the Vedic culture means, no, that remains foremost, even within household life. And then at a certain point, there's a period of more and more renunciation. Not that you just hang on till, the fag end of life, trying to enjoy petty little comforts. And, that's tragic. It's a tragic waste of human life, So, after we're reading this allegory, and it's going to go on for some time. But these purports, Prabhupada stresses this word avidya. Now this came up. I think you also quoted that, those verses by Rishabdev, where parabhavastavada bodha jato, the parabhavas is defeat for the living entity. And we're constantly being defeated. You're trying all these things materially, and then you're always defeated because time passes, your health deteriorates, and you die. So all of your aspirations are lost, and then you go on to, according to your activities, to a next life, maybe a human life. So, parabhavastavada bodha jato yavana jigyatasata tattvam. As long as you don't inquire into the absolute truth, what is the self, what is God, what is this world, what are the relationships, how can I achieve the ultimate goal of life and escape from the round of birth and death? Without those questions, you remain in ignorance. Parabhavastavada bodha jato. Abodha is the same thing as ignorance. Your defeat is born of ignorance, of avidya. Yavan najigya, as long as you don't inquire, you won't get knowledge, and therefore you remain ignorant. Yavat kriyas, therefore, by that ignorance, you're going to be performing material activities. Here's a kriya, what probably called fruit of activities. Yavat kriyas tavadidam manovai karmatmakam. And as long as you do that, you're going to the mind will be filled with what's called karmatmakam, a whole series of material desires, material regrets, fears. All this is going to remain in your mind, and the mind is the vehicle of getting your next body. The whole process we're doing is ultimately to purify the mind so it's filled simply with desires to serve Krishna. But that's the last thing you're thinking of in the material sphere. So that's called avidya. So the last verse talks about avidya in the series, and then there's a hopeful solution to the problem. Eva mana karma vasham bhayunte avidyayatma nupadiyamane. Thus, mana karma vasham. There's something called vasha, which means a impulsion. It's similar to the word vega. When your mind is filled with all of these desires and fears and material thoughts, there are certain tendencies that you have that almost like force you to act in this way. That's karma vasham payunte. So this is the nature of conditioned life, is that the mind is our worst enemy. In this condition, as Krishna mentions in the Gita, because it's filled with all of these material ideas. So then he says, Pritir Nayavan Maya Vasudeva. Until and unless one develops the love for me, Vasudeva, this is Rishabdev speaking, one will not be able to get free from the bondage of a material body. So there's no mukti without bhakti. This is the teaching. The idea that we can somehow be liberated just by going to Brahman or something is crazy. It doesn't work. Because naturally we have activities, we have form, we have desires. You can't repress those or destroy them. You can repress them for a while, but eventually they come out and you fall back down again into the material sphere. So Kapila Dev, gives a graphic description of the creation of this world. He gives a graphic description of the destiny of one who dies simply on a material consciousness. He describes as a quick, but very graphic description of hell here in these teachings. And here he's not pulling any punches about how dangerous it is to let yourself just get attracted to the opposite sex and get into that mood and think that that is a great trap. So how can we defend against that? By learning the Shastra and by practicing. You can't just. It's not just some philosophical thing. Philosophy has to lead to the practice, and the practice will give us realization of the truth of the philosophy. But here, this extended allegory is going to be very graphic. How this Puranjan gets totally entangled. If you read on, the queen, he's meeting his queen now. Of course, she accepts the proposal. She becomes the total boss, in the whole thing. Whenever she's eating, he's eating. Whenever she's drinking, she's drinking. It's like he's trapped. And the whole point of this allegory is don't be trapped. You're weaving your web by all these aspirations to go to the heavenly planets and acting and spending so much money, and paying the priests and everything, Plus, it's not being done perfectly, so you're going to suffer from it. So the result is that King Prachana Varishat will follow the course of his exalted sons, the Prachetas, and practice Krishna consciousness. Okay, it's just the right time, 8:30. So I'm going to read this wonderful, beautiful verse again. My dear girl, your face is so beautiful, with your nice eyebrows and eyes, and with your bluish hair scattered about. In addition, very sweet sounds are coming from your mouth. Nonetheless, you're so covered with shyness that you do not see me, you do not look at me face to face. I therefore request you, my dear girl, to smile and kindly raise your head to see me. He's trapped, he's caught, he's bewildered. Any questions or comments on this particular verse passage?
It's interesting to note how Ranjan and Srila Prabhupada and the purport talk about being attracted by the eyebrows of the woman.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows such a more subtle and refined culture that
Yeah.
existed previously. What to speak in the spiritual world, you hear so much of their dalliances. It's, eyebrows,
Yeah.
glances, just, so
Yeah, the
subtle.
eyebrows, like,
Yeah.
Radharani's eyebrows are like bows, you're shooting,
Yeah. I mean, this world, it's just so bodily, animal-like
It's
consciousness.
gross.
So,
Gross.
And it reminded me, like in the 20s, they used to have dresses that would, when it became risque when the ankle was shown, and so that's when they started glorifying the ankle of the lady, like, ooh, that's quite the ankle you got there. And now it's just degraded.
I know, we've gone so far down. Oh my God. Thank you. Okay, I thought he was going to ask a question. So what's the alternative? We have to become attracted to Krishna, and we've given a wealth of wonderful descriptions of Krishna. These in the 10th canto, there's 4 Gopi Geets. Now, of course, we're not jumping to the 10th canto, but Prabhupada gave us the Krishna book, and he said, just read this one book. You go back to guide it, because it's filled with, and it's wonderfully presented with so much philosophy and explanation. So you can't, get. But the one of the most delightful is the Venu Gita. The Venu Gita is it's named the Venu Gita because almost every verse the gopis are referring to the flute. So it begins where Krishna's leaving the town and he's going into the forest, right? And that alone is such a wonderful description. First the description of the atmosphere. It's the rainy season is over now. Autumn has come. Now in any wonderful agrarian community in Vrindavan, the whole thing is extremely lush now because all the water has fallen, and now the rains have stopped and the sun has come up, and so it describes that, kusamata banadari shishmi bringa vidikulagushta saraksadin mahidram madhapada vagaya charihanga sahapasupada badashta kuja venam. Chakuja, you can almost hear it. That's the sound of the flute playing very sweetly. So, and then what happens is the gopis hear that flute, that he's playing as he goes out, and their hearts start fluttering because it awakens their remembrance of Krishna's Leela, and so it begins with saying that a few of them get together and start describing Krishna's pastimes, but they're so overwhelmed with love that they can hardly speak, And then there's a verse that's very famous. I understand that in Vrindavan, and not in ISKCON temples, but in other temples where they give Bhagavatam class, they often chant this verse because it sets up the whole Vrindavan mood, Barha pidam natavadavapu. Notice natabar. We just sang about natabar, the best of dancers. Natavadavapu karnayo karnikaram bibradvasak kanaka kapisham vaijayanting chamalam Randran Veno Adadasudayapuriyan Gopa Vrinda Vrindaranyam Sopadanamanam Pravishad Gita Kirti. With lovely peacock plume upon his head and fragrant flower placed upon each ear, he enters Braja's woods with graceful tread, a handsome dancing actor without peer. His golden yellow raiment brightly glows, his splendid garland reaches to his knees, and from his luscious lips the nectar flows and fills his flute with charming melodies. As Krishna thus begins his blissful day with coward friends who sing his glory sweet, he beautifies Vrindavan's forest way with fine impressions of his lotus feet. So this, then what happens is the gopis, it says a few of them get together and start describing, then they can't describe, they sing this verse. Then the next verse says, and all of them are now getting together to sing of Krishna, and they're embracing each other, and then they're describing Krishna, and then they go on. And I'll just give you the first couple of ones. Akshanvatam. Now they begin by describing Balaram and Krishna. They're both together. And it's described in the commentaries that they're a little embarrassed that maybe their elders are watching, so they don't want to just describe Krishna. So they describe Krishna and Balaram. And that goes on for 2 verses, then they just describe Krishna. So, but it's so delightful. Akshanvatam palamidam naparam vidama sakya pashunana vivesha yato vayasyai vaktran vajesa sutayo anuvena jishtam hyavana pita manavakta kataksha moksham. So he says, for those who have eyes, there's no greater object of vision than to see the beautiful lotus faces of Krishna and Balaram as they enter the forest with their friends, herding the cows and playing their delightful flutes and casting loving sidelong glances upon all the residents of Vrindavan. And then they go on and describe that they're sometimes singing, they're very effulgent within it, and goes on and on. And one of the most famous ones, they're glorifying Govardhan Hill. Hantaya Mandalabala Haridasya Varya. You were here when we had our Haridas Varya Das. Remember? We had a devotee here named Haridas. Eventually we just started going to Haridas, but really it was Haridas. He's the servant of Govardhan Hill, which is the best of it. Anyway, this is the great, one of the wonderful aspects of Bhagavatam. It gives us so many beautiful ways of meditating on Krishna through the sound and evoking these images and fragrances and feelings and everything, so that we become attracted to Krishna. And of course the holy name, the chanting is the most important way, but the Bhagavatam is very important. And in this way we can see how this material attraction is just garbage in the street. And we have a question or comment from Bhakti Jamal.
Sorry, I guess I kind of interrupted the flow of your ending on a sweet note.
No.
You could end on a sweet note after this question. But thank you for the nice class, by the way.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
So it made me think of a situation in which I observed a friend of mine going through, and I'm just going to explain it quickly, just because I think it's like an accurate
What made
presentation.
You think of it?
The whole class.
Okay.
Yeah. 'Cause I think it's an accurate presentation of our plight with material nature. But anyway, I had this close friend in high school.
Hold it a little closer.
I had this close friend in high school, and she, she ended up getting involved with this guy, and they had some romance, whatever, I guess you could call it romance, but she ended up becoming pregnant by this guy, and unfortunately, because it's Kali Yuga and she was young, she didn't end up having the baby, but she, even though she had this quote-unquote romance with this guy, he was always very emotionally and verbally abusive towards her. She was always coming to me crying about it and things like that, and it was going on for years, years and years and years, at least, well, not years and years and years, but 3-4 years that this was going on. And I think that kind of accurately describes our situation with the material nature. We may have had something at one point that we prize, but a lot of the time we're being really hurt by material nature. We're being kicked around and emotionally distraught and things like that. So even though we know that this is happening, why is it that we, even though we're going through this turmoil with material nature, constantly being hurt and kicked around by it, why are we still trying to...
Sounds like the end of the 3rd chapter to me. This is the nature of, especially the modes of passion and ignorance, is that by engaging in activities under those modes, you become you lose your discrimination, and you lose your ability to impose. You're intelligent. You know this is bad for you. You know that this is self-destructive. but the senses, the mind, are so saturated with a certain pleasure that you got out of it, or that you I don't, all kinds of psychological things. Maybe the pleasure is being hurt by that. I don't know, but that you can't stop on your own. This is the nature of addiction. Addiction means that you're caught. You can't give it up on your own, right? And I always go back to this one this verse that some of you may know in the 15th chapter of Krishna describing transmigration in the near the beginning there. And one of the verses says, and when you transmigrate, then shrotram, chaksham, sparshan, angsha, rasanam, granam, evacha, adhisthaya, manaschayam, vishayanupasevate. That in your next birth you get a certain set of eye, ear, etc., and you vishayanupasevate. Vishayana, the object of the senses. Now, upasevate, I forget what Prabhupada uses. You engage with them or you interact with. But one of the meanings is you become addicted to. You become addicted to them. And so this idea of addiction is very important, because addiction it's obviously covering your intelligence or making it very weak so that you can't act. You're so habituated to taking shelter of a drug or some relationship or gambling or liquor, whatever it may be, that the temporary relief or the temporary pleasure it covers your intelligence, or it covers your ability to obey or to follow what you know is true. In other words, you weaken what's really valuable about being a human being. Because animals, they don't know anything. They have an intelligence, but it's very rudimentary. There's no should amongst animals, right? They don't have a moral sense. It's just what they're impelled to do, and the super soul will tell them, do this, go there, and you come out of the egg, and then after a little bit you get up, and before you know it you can fly and walk and you can do everything else. But human beings aren't like that. We have a whole period of gestation and then, education that's supposed to impart this higher sense because of working for shreyas instead of prayas. So if you go too much for the prayas, what feels good now? Like the old thing, if it feels good, do it. That was the hippie thing, in one sense. That's self-destruction. That's selling out your human life and the human intelligence and ensuring a whole bunch of suffering, which is what Rishabde's first verse was about. Nunam pamatta kurate vikarma yarandiya pritayapanoti. That certainly those people are mad. It's a type of madness. Who simply work for sense gratification. Now it can be more subtle. It can be in the mind, or the gross senses. Because such activity means you're sure to get another body, and that means you're sure to suffer. And in these days, you don't even have to wait for your next body. You're going to suffer more in this body, by doing that. Just like, getting pregnant, having a child, or she had abortion or something. That's just horrendous entanglement. So this is one of the reasons why in Vedic culture it's one thing that's so emphasized, the protection of womanhood. Because women can more easily be led astray than men, and that causes degradation in the whole society. Even if they give birth, the child is, becomes Varna Sankara, that causes this disturbance in society. You see, this destroys it. That was Arjun's argument in the first chapter. Protecting women, children, old men, Brahmins. This is a measure of civilization, society. And what do we have now? Just the opposite. I don't go into detail. But the society, there's no sense that even that should be done. So all I can say is that, we're surrounded by examples. You're fortunate, to have followed a different path. There's only a handful of us here. And even, you take all of the ISKCON members, it's still a handful compared to the 7.5 billion human beings on this planet. We should really be very thankful and pursue this Krishna conscious career, not only for our own benefit, because we can become forces for good in the world, which certainly needs it. It needs to get back its intelligence. As I wrote that the prayer to Prabhupada, which I'll end with a couple of years ago, for Vyasa Puja. O Prabhupada, on this great day, when you appear just like a ray of Krishna's vast effulgence bright, to give this blind world back its sight, we thank you from the bottom of our heart and pray with deepest love. We thank you from the bottom. Yeah, we thank you from the bottom of our heart and pray with deepest love that we may serve your lotus feet in every circumstance we meet. As years go by and books go out, we see what life is all about. To serve your mission and our Lord's by spreading wide your sacred words. As well, you want us all to strive to let those words direct our lives. This safest path will lead us home, no more in Maya's realm to roam. So that we're in the business of, taking advantage of what the gifts have been given to us and giving them out as far as possible so others can be saved. And this kind of story is legion, means that there's millions of stories like that. You get caught up, you're in college or high school, and you get and your whole life can be ruined. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Rama.